This podcast is brought to you by Anchor Podcasts. Have you yourself ever wanted to be a podcaster? Well, Anchor makes it simple and easy for you to start today. Download their app on your iPhone or Android device and go through their step-by-step process from recording all the way through distribution. Visit their website, anchor.fm, or download the app on your Android or iPhone device today. That's Anchor Podcast. What's up, guys? Travis Fowler, Harkrider, back again with another edition of the Four Corner Podcast. So that means that we are back with another week to talk about professional wrestling. So let's not waste any more time and let's talk wrestling. So this week didn't really have anything like outstanding going for it other than the continuation of the storylines both on the AEW and WWE side. Of course, AEW has the Revolution pay-per-view next weekend, and then WrestleMania is just right around the corner. We just have a little over a month left before April 1st, and it's hard to believe that it's already come this quick. On the WWE side, SmackDown Friday had a great closing segment promo between Sami Zayn and Jimmy Uso, and it really is just adding more into the story element of Sami and Jay, because Sami brought up a lot of good points, and Jimmy did too, and I think that's what's made this story so compelling, and why I still believe that WrestleMania will have a great payoff for Sami Zayn and the fans of Sami Zayn that just stick with it. Jay being caught in the middle between his actual family and then someone who he acknowledged like a brother is brilliant storytelling, and with the way that it seemingly is going, and like I've said for weeks on end, as well as several others, it always looks like the plan was for it to be the Usos versus KO and Sami, and then Sami's popularity just soared into another atmosphere. But nevertheless, I still think people will be pleased with the overall payoff at WrestleMania. And I gotta say, this has created a little bit of a dilemma for WWE, because the rumor is that they still are trying to figure out plans for WrestleMania Night 1 main event. And with Sami's popularity being what it is, and with WWE seemingly having Cody Rhodes cut off by Paul Heyman earlier this week on Raw for their promo battle, that was because they were afraid that the Sami chants would get out of hand and dilute the Cody Rhodes promo, so they had it done early. Brilliant move, but I don't think Cody's momentum is going to be hurt by any means. People still are very much invested into the Cody Rhodes story, and I think they're doing a great job building up to Cody versus Roman, but that face-off is going to happen here pretty soon. But anyway, I digress. We know what the main event of Night 2 will be, Cody versus Roman for the undisputed WWE Universal title. But what main events Night 1? Rumoredly, they wanted Rhea Ripley and Charlotte Flair to main event Night 1, specifically because they felt that last year having the males main event both nights took away a little bit from the females, and now they want to make sure that the females have good recognition going into Mania. And I don't have necessarily an issue with that if the story constitutes a main event. With the way that it's going, though, and as I said earlier, with Sami's popularity, I don't see how you don't put Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens versus the Usos anywhere but the main event. And especially if they end up having a stipulation with it, which I really do think it could benefit from, specifically, as I talked about on one of my earlier videos. My buddy suggested it, and I think it's a great idea. A ladder match with the Usos versus KO and Zayn would be phenomenal. And with the popularity of Sami being where it's at, he's got a main event Night 1. That's at least somewhat of a consolation prize, if you will, for them not having Sami Zayn take the title from Roman at Elimination Chamber. And when you've got a star that's as big as Sami has gotten over this whole story, you got to go with what the fans feel like. And I don't think, all due respect to Rhea Ripley and Charlotte Flair, I don't think they're going to build a compelling enough story in time to really have fans invested of it to be a main event level match. But we still have about 4 or 5 weeks until then, so we'll see what WWE pulls out. But I'm still pretty confident in saying that the Usos and Zayn and Owens should definitely main event night 1 of WrestleMania. But speaking of WrestleMania, couple dilemmas that I have is, one, the women's tag title situation is really interesting because I don't really know what they're planning to go with on this. Obviously, Damage Control has been in this rivalry with Becky Lynch, who is teaming up with Lita tomorrow night as I'm recording this on Sunday, the night before Raw. And they're going to take on Io Sky and Dakota Kai for the women's tag titles. Now, there was the plan initially to have Trish and Lita team up with Becky to take on Damage Control at Elimination Chamber. But I don't know if they'll continue that plan. And at this point, with the tag titles on the line tomorrow, there's questions as to exactly what's going to take place. Now, apparently Ronda Rousey has been advertised locally for the show. So some people think her and Shayna are going to come in and disrupt that tag match, which I could definitely see taking place. And that'll set up for some kind of what I feel is going to be a multi-team match for the women's tag titles. To me, that's the only way it would make sense. You can't have Damage Control just go up against one team if that indeed does happen. Which, if that is the case, to me, with the way the rivalry has played out, Becky Lynch and Bayley should have their own match, and then Dakota Kai and Io Sky defend the women's tag titles against Shayna and Ronda, and then have the team of frenemies, or whatever you want to call them, Trish and Lita, 2 legends, let them team up and go for the women's tag titles, and let it be a triple threat match for the women's tag titles. Why not? It seems like a good enough and logical story progression for those tag titles. It also brings a little bit of notoriety and spotlight to that matchup and the women's tag title specifically, because we all know they surely do need it. So I think that would be a good utilization of using legends along with new school people to help carry a tag title situation to a WrestleMania match. But another head scratcher for WrestleMania that's going to be addressed tomorrow night. Brock Lesnar versus Omos? Yeah, not really anything that I don't think anybody's wanting. Rumoredly, people think that this is just a way to set up Bobby Lashley versus Brock Lesnar again, but then also you've got this Bray Wyatt factor to contend with, and I'm just like, I don't know what they're wanting to do with Bray, because he was talking about how he wants to take on the winner, but Lashley won by DQ and Lesnar looked dominant through that disqualification, so that really didn't have any finality to it. But you can't leave Bray off the show at this point, so do you do some kind of triple threat with the 3 of them, or what? Because to me, and I think a lot of people feel this way, at the end of the day, Omos and Brock Lesnar is not WrestleMania worthy. I don't care what anybody wants to try to tell me otherwise. It's not going to convince me of anything less. It's not a WrestleMania worthy match. It just isn't. Almost isn't a character. Made me sound like I said almost. Almost is not at that level to take on Brock Lesnar. I know that he's 7 foot tall plus, legitimately, but Braun Strowman's already beat him. And Lesnar's smaller than Strowman. And I don't think they've done a good enough job of building up Omos to the point where he could be believable to defeat Brock Lesnar. I don't think anybody would buy that. So I guess we'll just have to have a wait and see approach when it comes to Lesnar's WrestleMania situation, as well as Lashley and Wyatt's as well. But speaking of big shows like a WrestleMania, anybody else catch that A&E documentary about NWO? Because I thoroughly enjoyed it, but there's a segment on there that still rattles my cages quite a bit. And I think a lot of people that were fans of WCW at the time might understand and even agree with what I'm about to say. Starrcade 97, the biggest show that WCW had up until that point, arguably ever, certainly in buy rates. No other show did what it did. And it was built off of the NWO and Sting storyline, which is the storyline that thoroughly got me invested into professional wrestling as a kid. The payoff should have simply been Sting versus Hogan, and Sting walks out as WCW champion. And to side a little bit with Eric Bischoff, who did say this on an episode of his podcast about Starrcade 97, at the end of the night, the fans did get that. Sting did indeed walk out with the championship, and the fans went crazy. But let's face it, there's always going to be an asterisk with that matchup because of how the, I guess you can call it, original ending ended up going. Having Nick Patrick do a normal count when they tried to sell it as a fast count, and it certainly wasn't. Even I knew that back then. And it was the chance of a lifetime to create a moment that everybody would be talking about for the rest of wrestling time, with one of the best stories that was ever told, and the ball was fumbled. Granted, they did pick it up, and like I said, at the end of the day, they made it to the end zone of Sting being world champion, but I, like many others, still believe it should have been handled a different way. Hogan exercising his creative control that day should have never happened. Kevin Nash said it best: never give a wrestler creative control of their character, because then situations like this take place. It should have been a simple situation, and even still keep the fast count. Like, I still don't have a problem with what they did, because they could have easily done that screw job finish. Bret Hart comes out and everything still goes as they planned. But the fact that the fast count didn't happen and Hogan did technically win, it really just puts a damper on the whole story. And honestly, the match will always be remembered as being a botched match. And it's unfortunate, but that's the way that it is in WCW and professional wrestling history. Now, let's get back to current times, because on this podcast, you've heard me say it before, I'm going to talk anything and everything from current things to past things, but I want to bring it back to current situations. Notably, before we go into AEW stuff, Jeff Hardy, actually, this is going into AEW stuff. Jeff Hardy was finishing up his trial this past week, where he did plead no contest, and he was sentenced to 38 days in jail, but it was a credited sentence, so he will not be doing any sort of jail time. He is put on probation with a suspended license for 10 years. And now everybody wants to know exactly when we'll see Jeff Hardy come back. As Tony Khan stated when he was originally suspended for this last incident, he would only allow Hardy to come back once he has been sober and completed his sober situation through a sober living or whatever he needs to go through. That would be the only way that he will clear him to come back to AEW, which is smart. It's the best way to do it. So hopefully Hardy has taken that seriously, which according to his brother Matt, he has. And Matt has said that he's never seen his brother in a better situation. He's healthy, he's happy. So hopefully we'll see Jeff come back to our screens here in the very near future. Personally, I think we will, because I think he'll do something to get involved with the situation of the firm with Matt Hardy at the moment. But nevertheless, Jeff Hardy, I hope he continues to do well, and I hope we see him back on our AEW screens here sooner rather than later. But anyway, continuing on with an AEW theme, the Wrestling Observer newsletter handed out its yearly awards, and I don't think anybody was surprised by this, but it was a very biased situation. And I know I saw a tweet earlier today where Meltzer was correcting somebody and stating how, yeah, it's totally an AEW-sided situation when there's like 8 other companies that were put on there. Yeah, you're right. There were like 8 wrestling companies put on your awards list. But let me go ahead and specify that most of your positive awards were all AEW, whereas your negative awards, for the most part, went towards all those other promotions, including WWE. So to say that you're not a little AEW biased, I think is a straight up lie. Because for them to get Booker of the Year, Promotion of the Year, Feud of the Year, and so on and so forth, yeah, you definitely lean more towards AEW in this situation. Whether or not you admit that, I mean, you can't deny it, but whether you want to admit that you were more biased towards them and WWE, I think the proof is in the pudding at this point. But that did bring up an interesting thing that I saw. Who has been the better heel? Not just as champion, but overall. Roman Reigns, the undisputed WWE Universal Champion, and the AEW Heavyweight Champion, MJF. And I saw this put on Twitter earlier this week saying, who's been the best heel champion? But that posed that question where I'm like, well, who's honestly been the best heel over the last few years? And I can see where people would argue that MJF is definitely the one who would get that accolade over Roman, because let's face it, the dude can generate heat out of thin air. I mean, the guy went from getting virtually cheered to now he can get the crowd to boo him with some chicanery very quickly. All he uses is his promo skills, which have always been top notch. But I think Roman Reigns has been the better heel, not just as champion, but overall. And the reason being is because of the constraints that Roman has. And people might be saying, well, what kind of constraints? It's simple, the PG restraints. MJF can generate heat with his promos. MJF generates heat by saying things that are a little controversial or straight up inappropriate. And that can be labeled as cheap heat. I personally don't have a problem with it, but when you can lean into that cheap heat or even use certain language that you can't use over on the WWE side, I would argue it may be easier to get over and to get heat as a heel. Roman, though, has to play within a PG boundary. We know that Roman has had issues early on in his career with promos of how to really get the crowd invested. Since his character changed, though, Paul Heyman's been his mouthpiece and a godsend for the most part to him, and he's played the heel role exactly how people wanted him to play it from the very start of his singles career if they would have actually gone that way. Roman's done it, and he has been turned into not just a credible champion, but a credible performer, where he now has, to me, the best heat of any heel in wrestling. When he got the FU Roman chants back at the Rumble, I did not expect that. And to hear that from the live audience, and then even at Montreal, which we all expected there to be a lot of anti-Romans, but to hear how good he has done about getting the crowd to hate him, especially with this bloodline story, it really is a testament to how Roman has improved his game since he came back as this tribal chief character. And because of that, I think he actually is the better heel between him and MJF. Now, again, that's just my personal opinion, and that's not saying I hate MJF. I love the MJF character, but I love Roman's character as well, and I think Tribal Chief has trumped the brash, cocky guy in this instance. But something else that I think is worth noting is WWE announcing some of their pay-per-view plans that are going to take place in the month of May, and it kind of has me excited. First off, WrestleMania Backlash is no longer WrestleMania Backlash. They have taken it straight back to simply Backlash, and I love that. Backlash always was one of my favorite pay-per-views, honestly, when it was around. And when you look back at the history of Backlash, it legitimately has been one of those quote-unquote B pay-per-view shows that always seems to deliver in some form or fashion. It's crazy. But like you have the Backlash in '99, the first one that had that had Rock and Austin main event and their rematch from Mania 15 in an awesome no holds barred match. Then you had the following year where it was main evented by what should have been the WrestleMania 2000 main event of Triple H versus The Rock, with all of the odds stacked against The Rock, and Austin also returned in that. The very next year was the Shane McMahon bump where he did the elbow to the Big Show in Last Man Standing, along with the winner-take-all tag team main event of the Brothers of Destruction versus the two-man power trip. Then Backlash 2002 saw the return of Hulk Hogan against Triple H to become the undisputed champion. So on and so forth. Goldberg coming in and beating The Rock at 2003. 2004 in Montreal, the rematch from WrestleMania 20 in their main event. Literally, Backlash has always delivered. So I'm glad that they dropped the WrestleMania from it and just letting it stand on its own identity again. But even more exciting than that is the return to a premium live event, I won't call it a pay-per-view anymore, of King and Queen of the Ring. I'm glad they're cutting the Queen's crown and calling it just simply Queen of the Ring, which is what they should have done to begin with. But bringing it back as a premium live event is awesome. I've always been a big fan of tournament bracket formats, and I think bringing it back is a great way to potentially elevate new stars. Much to the same tool as what the Royal Rumble could be used for, King of the Ring has that exact same quality to me. And now you add in the Queen of the Ring factor as well. WWE really has an opportunity to take someone that they've wanted to potentially elevate to a higher status in the company, and they can do that through the King of the Ring and Queen of the Ring tournaments, respectively. So I'm excited for it, and I can't wait to see what this tournament ends up shaping up to be, whether it be a one-night tournament for both or a build-up to at least the semifinals of the King and Queen of the Ring tournaments for the PLE. It's really just an exciting time, and I can't wait to see what they pull off for the month of May. But guys, that's all I got for you this week. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please share your comments down below, as well as give us a 5-star review on any format that you listen to the podcast version on. Here on YouTube, give us that like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Make sure you share this with your friends and hit that bell notification so that you're notified anytime we upload a video to the channel. And you can also follow us on all the socials, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We are definitely doing wonderful of reaching out to our wide audience, and I appreciate everybody that continues to share the 4CP name to all their friends. And please just continue that support and let me know what you want to hear. Let me know your opinions. Do you like King of the Ring coming back? Do you think Backlash is a little overrated from what I just named out to you? What do you think should be the main event of WrestleMania Night 1? Tell me everything. Tell me your comments and let's chat about wrestling, because as I've said before, I love talking wrestling with all of you. And as always, I'll be back next week to talk more wrestling. But until then, keep watching and keep loving wrestling. See you guys.